There, see the REC? Now you're recording.
Okay.
So you can start.
Okay.
I'll go shut the door for you so I have some
Thank you,
privacy.
Barb. Tuesday, the 5th of February, 2013, 10 a.m. at the Desbrizé Museum with Carole A. MacLaren, and the interview is conducted by Betty Dolliver. Carole, would you tell us, please, about growing up in Bridgewater?
Yes, I'd be pleased to, Betty. Hope my memory will give you a good synopsis of how it was, but I started school in 1944, and my recollections going back are all very happy ones. I love my school days, and I started school in the little annex that was on Queen Street that is now has been demolished some years, and I went to primary through to grade 4 there. And the teachers were all, to me it seemed all older teachers. My favorite teacher in grade 4 was Iva Romke, who was Iva Mosier, and she was just a wonderful lady. She's still living in Bridgewater, and that was an easy transition from one classroom. You didn't move in those days in that building. You just went to another classroom. So from grade primary to grade 4. I know I used to have to stand up and read a lot when she was marking papers. I remember she'd get me to read till I'd almost get dizzy. And everybody seemed to be on the same wavelength. There were never any feelings of one child being dressed better than another. After all, it was after war days, and everybody was on the same level. A lot of us lived in apartments, and nobody too much owned their homes. So after grade 4, we were moved over to the big elementary school. And that was quite a transition for us. We thought we were really getting up there. But I must reflect back a moment. The thing that I also remember are the exhibition parades. Starting in grade 2, I believe, it was a big deal to start getting ready for an exhibition parade in September. And everybody helped. The teachers would help us with our costumes. And I do have pictures of some of those grades. And that was so exciting. And we would march from Queen Street right back up the exhibition hill. No matter how small we were, we did it. And so I'll go back to the big move to the big elementary school, where what we call Pa Hurdle was the principal. Everybody was in fear of Pa Hurdle, even though he was a dear soul. But he ruled. And I was there from grade 5 and 6. Excuse me. And the big thing there in that building, we were with high school students. There were a lot of high school students in that building. We were on the first floor. And the big event of that would be to go to assembly with the high school students. Oh boy, that was a really big deal. I remember Mrs. Newell was our music teacher. She was a wonderful music teacher. And we would also practice for the different music festivals. And excuse me, sorry, I had to cough. So after going through grades 5 and 6 there in that big elementary building, we were back to the annex building for junior high for grades 7, 8, and 9. And I always remember the first day that Doug Roach came to town. He was a graduate of Acadia. He came in this probably a 52 Ford or 50s green Ford. And what a handsome man he was, and all the girls had crushes on him, and they thought he was so sweet. After all these older teachers, a man comes into the scene which had not been there. So anyway, Doug started gym classes, which was a wonderful thing. But we would go over to the another school, and I do believe it was the new school that was built in 1953, I believe it was. And so that was a big deal. You wore your blue bloomers. There was this gym outfit that you had to put on. You had to wear your sneakers. And he started calisthenics and so many programs in the school that the school had never had. So some of them really, the boys especially, became involved in that. And he would have shows with lights, and we thought we were coming up in the world to see things like this. So the teachers in junior high, that's when you would change from schoolroom to schoolroom. And I remember Ruth Kelly and Dot Cole, and it was, Mr. Hayes came, and he indoctrinated a lot of things into the junior high. He was big on war films, and we would go down to the basement and watch war films, because it hadn't been that long. And as horrifying as they were to watch, he would give the history with it, and it was interesting. And then a group of us painted the lower annex basement, and the ones who put the most hours in, we got a trip to the valley. Well, that was a big deal. And he also had a rifle range down there, and that was fun. I remember joining that. And junior high, we were still in the parades. We were still marching in the parade. And after that, we weren't. Once you got to high school, you didn't do that. I can't say that junior high, it had more going for it. Of course, it was still, Mrs. Newell had a boys' glee club. We had a glee club. And then in 53, when the new Dawson Memorial High School opened, that's when we started our grade 10, 11, and 12. And that was wonderful years. I always loved school, and if I had to miss a day of school, that was a terrible thing. It wasn't that I was such a great student, but I always passed, but it was just an atmosphere of your friends were there, and you wanted to be there, and then the hockey games started. Of course, they started a bit in junior high, but really progressed more into high school, and football, rugby, and then the cheerleading started. And I became captain of the cheerleaders. Well, we did our own thing. We dressed in the high school colors. We had little short skirts and sweatshirts with the big B on them. And at that time, they started giving out silver Bs for being the best scholar or involved in sports, or it had many facets to it. There were silver Bs, and I think there might have been gold ones, I'm not sure. And then the plays started, the musical plays with Mr. Ross Bazant, Sunbonnet Sue, and there were several of them. I'm not going to say the other one. But he was such an asset to our school, and we had wonderful musical programs. Hockey was big. Our arena was a blessing to us because we spent hours and hours skating, especially Friday nights, weekends, because there were no bowling alleys at that time. And now I'm into the 50s. Well, I graduated in 57.
Keep going.
57. So I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that was different. I think back, and there was no such thing as school buses to drive you to school. In my early years, we lived on the south end of town, on the end of Scotia Street. And I don't ever remember. I remember walking in snow up to my knees, and you still went to school.
Yeah.
You did not have a ride. There was nobody in my house to give me a ride, and everybody walked. That's the way it was. So basically we were brought up, I think, in the best time in the 50s. I speak to so many people who went to school here or who are still living here, and they all agree we grew up in the best time. We really did. And the other thing that happened in high school it was just wonderful. Rock and roll came in with Elvis Presley and all the different ones that started. And high school dances were big. Oh my goodness, didn't we love high school dances? And of course you were wanting to get to the big grade 12 grad. That was always prom. That was always a big deal. And I was crowned Miss BHS at that grade 12 graduation. I wasn't valedictorian at my grad, but I was historian. And fortunately, we have a class, and this is the year 2013. We are celebrating our 56th high school reunion, our class of 57, and it's very, very unusual. We've kept together for years and years, and for years the teachers, while they were living, came, and our last living one, Ross Bazan, passed in January at the age of 96. They were wonderful days when the teachers would come from years ago and see us, and we'd have a great weekend planned. Moving on to past high school, in those days not many people went to university. You might be from a family that had money to send you, but not too many of us, and basically for girls it was nursing or secretarial or teaching. And we had a class of 21 that graduated, and a few of them really did become successful in many fields. I myself started out in nursing, but it wasn't my chosen career. I think more influence to get me there than anything. And so I worked for a year in the provincial building in Halifax, in the office there, and Mr. McKim, who was the head of the provincial building, said, "Carole, you go back home and get your course, your commercial course from the Bridgewater Commercial School where the MacLeods ran it." And he said, "Our best girls are from Bridgewater Commercial School." And there were many of them in the city at that time. A lot of people didn't finish grade 12. They would go on to grade 11 or even grade 10 in lots of cases. Some joined the Navy or they did other things, but grade 11 was usually the watermark. So if you got to grade 12, that was special. And then I came back and went to Bridgewater Commercial School, which was the best thing I ever did. And they were strict, the MacLeods, and many, many people would remember the MacLeods. He had a saying, "Spellings is an important lesson." And to this day, there isn't anybody who will remember, forget it.
Where did you work when you...
Oh, I finished the commercial course, and first I worked for Mr. Norman Rayfuse in the Bulletin, who owned it at that time, for that summer. And then, fortunately, I did get a job with Maritime Tell and Tell, which was on Upper King Street. I was there for 5 years as a service order clerk and secretary. And that's a wonderful company to be part of, too. Went on to be married and have 3 children. Unfortunately, lost the first little boy. And in later years, I became involved. After 2 children, I became involved in the hospital, and that was my 3 children. 2 children were born in the Dawson Memorial, the original one, where I was, and then the 3rd child in the new hospital, which is now the call center. Hard to believe the changes. And having a wonderful grandfather, Granddaddy Daniel MacLeod, lived with us for many, many years. And when he had to go into a nursing home, that was something that we all felt so bad about, but we made many visits over there. And when we lost him, when he passed, I was lost because I could see in nursing homes the need for people to go and visit. So I went to the hospital on the hill, where the middle one today, which is the call center, and started volunteering, pushing the cart around to the different rooms. What you want me to do, I guess, to give you a history there. And first thing, I was asked to be director of volunteers in the hospital. Well, that was quite an honor to be asked. And I went on to do it and had many candy stripers and senior volunteers. And today, I'm happy to say a lot of those girls are nurses in our local hospital. Some of them, there's a few of them, and they've done very well. And so then I had to go back to work and worked for 2 optometrists for 12 and a half years. But in '89, my husband and I had a bad car accident and was in therapy for a long time. So when I got to physio in our hospital, the girl said, well, if you're not going back to work, why don't you come and be a volunteer here? So I did for 17 years there in that department. Meantime, had also taken the palliative care course in the hospital. And that I was doing both palliative care for 5 years and also in physio as a volunteer. I regress back to say that growing up there were brownies and Girl Guides. And I was a brownie, and we had Girl Guides, and we went to Girl Guide camp on Herman's Island. Also, Mushamush Lake to the Lutheran Youth Camp, to camp there. And we were lucky to be able to do that. That was a wonderful time of our lives. I took on the Rangers, which were a group of girls from 14 to 18. And Margaret Hutchison and I were guiders for 10 years there. We also incorporated the Duke of Edinburgh program into the Rangers. And we had 2 gold girls, which we were very proud of. Carole Pickings Anthony, who works with the town today, Recreation, and Rhea Davidson. And so that was the Rangers and Candy Stripers, Duke of Edinburgh Award. So, time goes by and you see a lot of changes, and some you like and some you don't. And so...
What did the Candy Stripers do?
The Candy Stripers in the hospital, in the social regional, the middle hospital, I call it, they did pretty well the things that they do today. They would read to the patients, take food to them, run errands. They were, even if they sat and talked to the patients who didn't have company or who wanted somebody to chat with, they would run errands for the nurses. Basically the same thing they do today. I can't see, today they don't call them Candy Stripers. They call them their junior workers that come in. They wear red pullover, a red pullover, rather than, the Candy Striper name is gone. Yeah, it's gone. It's no longer Candy Stripers. And also young men are part of this program today, which is nice. And a lot of them do go on to university and study in medicine. So that's a wonderful thing. If only more young people came into the hospital to find out if that's what they'd like to do, and then get there and find out it's not what they want to do.
Yes.
Yeah. The hospital auxiliary has been a wonderful foundation for the hospital, and I'm sure that will be covered at some point with someone who can go back further than I can.
Yeah.
I don't suppose many people would remember that we skated outdoors while the arena was being built. And there used to be band concerts there for fundraising. And I also remember skating in the old exhibition building. That's really going back. And there would be winter carnivals there. And that was wonderful. And then there'd be races, skating races. But when we received our arena, that was just a wonderful thing. Yeah. Always carnivals. You dress up and skate. There'd be prizes.
Do you remember the water carnivals?
And I do remember the water carnivals. I sure do. Sitting on the riverbank, and so that was a very exciting time in the summer. And I can remember spending a lot of time on my grandparents' farm in Hibbville, Walter and Hetty Hibb's farm. And then my cousin would come home from the States with her mom and dad, and we'd all go to the water carnival. That was quite an exciting time. Boats coming up all decorated. It's a shame that ever stopped. Yeah, I don't know if that will ever come back. Yeah, it's one of the good things. And of course, when they put up the parkades, that changed Bridgewater totally. Because I can so remember my grandfather would go and sit over on the park benches and yarn with his people. And Saturday night in Bridgewater, that was just a wonderful time. Everybody knew everybody, and the people come in from the country. And my husband often says how he lived in Crosstown, and they would come up on a wagon, and you'd pay 25 cents to come up to go to a show. And speaking of shows, the old Capitol Theater, that was the first time I ever got to go to a show. Well, that was a big deal. 10 cents to go to a movie. And also my grandfather would buy us community concert tickets. And it was a wonderful exposure. Maybe I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have, but it certainly planted its roots in me because I love really good music, and I think of him so often because he played the violin. I grew up in a home of music. That's what people did. My mom played the piano, he played the violin, my uncle played the guitar, and there was always music. But if he could ever hear the Celtic music today, we try to go to some of the concerts, and they're just wonderful.
Yeah.
But the music did start in the Capitol Theater, and it would be packed. It was a big theater. Yeah, that was one of the...
That was on Pleasant?
It was on Pleasant Street and ran down the hill to the post office. It was up behind the post office. Yeah. So many people lived in apartments at that time. There was a whole circle of us from Dominion Street all through the different areas there. People lived in apartments, more so than we still have apartment living, but it seemed more and more of my friends and my growing up was in apartments. Yeah. Tennis was a big thing in Bridgewater. That was something that I never got to join, but my good friend Jean McCarg, Fraser McCarg, she was always over there, and there would be tennis dances. And, yeah, there were things. Then bowling came to Bridgewater, and that was quite something too. And it's still a big pastime for so many people.
How many come back for reunions, Carole?
Well, there's one other group ahead of us that has one every year. But in our class there were 21, and we have, with spouses, we have an average of about 23 with spouses. 3 of them died. And so the group itself there's about, I guess, there's about a dozen of us. And so they bring spouses, and a very close-knit group. And I have made a scrapping book of the first 50 years of our reunions. And we've decorated the hotels, Oak Island Inn, White Point. Started out at people's homes, very small, because everybody had small children. And Bridgewater Motor Inn, where we had a wonderful gathering of teachers that came. But now all our teachers are gone with Mr. Bazan's passing. You have to work at it. You have to have a good committee. And that comes from the people who stayed. And I have so many people tell me over the years, you were so lucky that you stayed where you were because you have so many friends and you never are with the people that you can share your life with. Now people will come back and they love to come back. I don't really think many of them would want to live here, but some of them as they got older said it would be so nice to have that many friends. Because when you keep moving, you know, you don't form the friendships to last forever.
Donnie Sutherland was older than you.
He was a few years older than me. His brother Freddie was probably 2 years older than me. But I well remember Donnie Sutherland. Yep, I can see him walking down Dominion Street with his long coat and his long scarf. And I remember his mom and dad driving through town in their convertible. And as I remember, Captain Lou Kennedy and his wife, another notorious person, went to school with his son Brian. Keep in touch with him there in Florida. Yeah, there was characters along the way. And well, Donnie worked at CKBW for a short time, going to high school. Yeah, I'm still amazed when I see him in a movie to think he came from Bridgewater. And, well, most of his time was in his high school days. Freddie went on, I'm not sure, Freddie, I don't believe he is still living, but you certainly see and hear about Donnie. Yeah, they lived up in Cookville. And he used to go with this little short girl, Rita Perry. And she was so tiny compared to Donnie. Yeah, and I'm sure everybody who went to school with him will never forget him. Yeah. I know Jamie McLeod was invited into Halifax to St. Mary's University when they honored Donnie, and Jamie did go. And as soon as he walked through the door, Donnie saw him and went right to him, recognized him. And he came back another time, but he didn't contact anybody. He just went up and stood in the park up at the plaza and looked up at the radio station. Not that he would have been in that radio station. He would have been down on King Street.
Well, Carole, I can't think of anything else. But thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I hope it was a little help.
I'm sure it was a big help.